Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening. I reckon Mr. Queen Bas told you about the incident that befall my research institute this time. And I'm sure you know the culprit behind it, Mr. Farwell, Roxanne stated. Blunt, she continued, despite having avoided you such, Mrs. Farwell still misunderstood things. As you can see, all she needed to do was to say a few words. Consequently, not only had my small research institute been plunged into turmoil, but it might not even be able to survive in Horrington. I only came back this time because of the research institute, so I don't want any other trouble, nor can I afford to be embroiled in any. Therefore, please be considerate of my predicament, Mr. Farwell. Her words were like a dagger stabbing Lucian right in the heart. In truth, that was also the reason he allowed her to avoid him recently. He didn't want to see her getting into unnecessary trouble because of him. When he was being personally reminded of that fact, however, a peculiar feeling rose within him. He was both anguished about her predicament and regretful that he ultimately wasn't firm enough with his mother, failing to protect her. Roxanne didn't want to continue further, nor had she the strength to do so. She merely stated, "Please have Mr. Lawson pull over, Mr. Farwell. We're now close enough to my house that I can take a taxi home." Lucian was silent for a long moment. In the end, he raised the partition and ordered Caden to pull over in a tense voice. Caden found it strange, but he also knew there must have been some conflict between his boss and Roxanne. Surprisingly, it was Lucian who relented. At the man's orders, he pulled over at the nearest intersection. After thanking the man detachedly, Roxanne opened the car door and alighted from the car. "Are we leaving, Mr. Farwell?" Caden inquired cautiously upon seeing that the woman had gone a distance away. Lucian said nothing, his gaze fixated on Roxanne at the side of the road in the distance. Indeed, it was difficult to hail a taxi at that hour. Roxanne waited a long time by the roadside before she managed to get a taxi. Opening the car door, she climbed into the taxi. When Caden received no response from Lucian after a while, he naturally knew why the man was waiting. Seeing that Roxanne had gotten into the taxi, he asked once more, "Where are we going, Mr. Farwell?" "Follow the taxi," Lucian instructed tersely. Although Roxanne's every word angered him, he couldn't help worrying over her. Murmuring in acknowledgement, Caden started the car and followed behind the taxi at a moderate distance. He trailed it all the way to Roxanne's mansion and watched as the latter alighted from the taxi and entered the mansion before turning around and merging into the traffic, driving toward the Farwell residence. By the time Roxanne arrived home, it was already close to 10 o'clock. Due to her stalemate with Lucian earlier, weariness was written all over her face. Archie and Benny had been waiting for her downstairs. When they caught sight of her stepping into the house, they immediately trotted over in concern. Mommy. You look exceedingly tired. Is the problem with the research institute very tricky?" Forcing a smile, Roxanne patted their heads in reassurance. "I'm fine. I'm just a touch sleepy." Benny took the jacket she removed. Just when he was going to hang it up, he found the smell clinging to it somewhat familiar. "This seems to be Daddy's smell." He instinctively scrutinized Roxanne. Exhausted physically and mentally, Roxanne didn't notice his abnormality. She apologized to them in a gentle voice, murmuring, "Sorry I came home so late. It's late now, so I'll take you both upstairs to rest." Failing to perceive anything amiss about her, Benny frowned in puzzlement. Considering the smell, Mommy must have met up with Daddy. He glanced at her weary face again, ultimately swallowing the question on the tip of his tongue. Judging from her look, it must have been unpleasant, even if that's the case. Hence, asking her about it will only upset her. After hanging up the jacket, he obediently followed Roxanne upstairs to rest. It was already late in the night when Lucian returned to the Farwell residence. Estella had already fallen asleep a long while ago. Lucian's heart ached when he was reminded of how Roxanne had completely avoided mentioning Estella just now. He went upstairs to Estella's room. The little girl had a serene sleeping posture. She lay on her side with half her face covered with blanket, seemingly sound asleep. Lucian's gaze softened at the sight of his daughter. He lifted his arm and patted her head. Then he tucked her in before getting up and left. Just when he reached the door, he suddenly heard a sound behind him as if Estella was sobbing. He stopped abruptly in his tracks, turned on his heels, and returned to her bedside. Lucian gently pulled away the blanket covering Estella's face and saw her brows furrowed, eyes shut, and beads of tears staining her long eyelashes. He wondered what kind of nightmare she was experiencing. Lucian felt sorrowful when he saw her daughter in that state. He raised his hand, wanting to wipe the tears off Estella's face. However, at that moment, she muttered in her sleep, "Miss Jarvis. Don't go, Miss Jarvis." Lucian frowned upon hearing that. In the past few days he left right after coaxing Estella to sleep. Even when he checked in on her in the middle of the night, he merely glanced if Estella had kicked her blanket away before turning to leave. How many times has Essie experienced similar dreams without my knowledge? Essie misses Roxanne so much. Yet Roxanne was so merciless. She was completely unfazed even when she heard of Essie's condition. At that thought, Lucian felt the temperature around him dropped. Estella seemed to be frightened by him in her sleep because she suddenly started bawling. He snapped back to his senses, carefully carried Estella, who was still wrapped in the blanket, and clumsily pulled her back. "It's all right, Essie, Daddy is here." However, Estella continues to cry her eyes out. "No. Don't go. Boo-hoo." Lucian's frown deepened as he listened to Estella's wails. How could I not hear her if this is how loudly she cries? Just when he was blaming himself for his lack of attentiveness, Estella woke up. She groggily hugged his neck, staining Lucian's clothes with her tears. Lucian did not mind. He asked with concern, "Don't cry, Essie. Daddy is here. Tell me, what did you dream about?" Estella had yet to recollect herself as she whimpered Roxanne, Archie, and Benny's names. Needless to say, she had dreamt of the scene when Roxanne, Archie, and Benny left. Lucian could not bring himself to probe Estella further. He tightened his arms around her in an embrace. After a long while, she was finally wide awake. She pushed herself away from him by supporting her tiny arms on Lucian's shoulder. He freed one of his arms to wipe the tears off her face. "Did you dream of Miss Jarvis?" She nodded in grievances. Estella had a dream about Roxanne, Archie, and Benny boarding a plane. She called them, but they ignored her, so she had no choice but to chase after their plane. However, Estella failed to catch up with them and even tripped over. When she was reminded of the scenes in her dreams, Estella's eyes reddened again. "Be good. Miss Jarvis has yet to leave. I just met with her just now." Lucian tried his best to suppress his dissatisfaction toward Roxanne and tenderly comforted his daughter. Estella leaned closer to him doubtfully and took a sniff with her nose wrinkled. Her face gradually slackened when she caught a whiff of Roxanne's body odor on Lucian. Lucian asked again in concern, "Do you have this kind of dream every night, Essie?" She pursed her lips and shook her head. Lucian knitted his brows in confusion at that sight. Essie did not meet with Roxanne recently, nor did she dream about her previously. Why is she having this dream now and crying so badly today? Archie and Benny told me Miss Jarvis will take them overseas once she is done with her work at the Research Institute. Estella was crestfallen when she recalled her conversation with Archie and Benny at the kindergarten yesterday. She thought Roxanne was merely lying to her previously, and Archie and Benny also told her they would not be leaving. However, the two kids informed Estella that they would not stay much longer in the country. Moreover, since Roxanne told Estella she would be going abroad, Estella had not seen the latter. With that thought in mind, Estella could not contain her urge to shed tears again. Hearing his daughter's words, Lucian's face gradually darkened. According to Archie and Benny, Roxanne would have been abroad now if it weren't for this incident. Estella tugged at the hem of her father's shirt and uttered in a childish voice, "Daddy, I am reluctant to see Miss Jarvis go." Lucian pulled himself back to reality and held her daughter's tiny hands. He consoled her, "I know. I'll have a good talk with Miss Jarvis." Estella nodded. Her eyes glazed over as she let out a yawn. Lucian placed Estella on the bed and tucked her in. "Go to sleep. I'll stay here and keep you company." Her head lolled to the side, and she dozed off after lying on the bed for a short while. Complicated emotions churned within Lucian as he took in his daughter's calm sleeping face while pondering on her words earlier. After Estella was sound asleep, Lucian tiptoed out of the room and returned to his bedroom. When he was done washing up and was ready to sleep, it was already past midnight. Early the next morning, Lucian suffered from an intense headache. Caden was already waiting for him at the entrance of Lucian's office when the latter arrived. Caden hurried forward at the sight of his boss. "Mr. Farwell." Lucian nodded and replied in a hoarse voice, "What's the matter?" Caden took out a document and dipped to a page before showing it to Lucian. "There are some minor problems with our project at Summerbank. The people at Summerbank are requesting a person in charge from our side to make a trip there in person. However, Mr. Langdon has been handling another project recently, so he's currently unable to leave his post. What do you think?" Lucian received the document and took a glance. The issue with the project was not something serious. Assigning a project manager to Summerbank would have been sufficient. However, Lucian had a different idea when he announced the meeting place arranged by the other party. He said to Caden, "I'll get back to you in a short while." Caden replied affirmatively. Upon entering his office, Lucian took out his phone and contacted Jonathan. Meanwhile, Jonathan had just confirmed the meeting time with medicinal herb suppliers at Summerbank and was about to ring Roxanne. Lucian called him all of a sudden. Jonathan answered the call instantly. "That matter you mentioned yesterday about deciding a time to meet with the medicinal herb suppliers from Summerbank, have you finalized the details?" "If you haven't," Lucian uttered solemnly. Jonathan interjected Lucian cheerfully amidst the latter's speech, "You are more impatient than Dr. Jarvis. Even she has not urged me regarding this matter." Lucian grunted in response. "I just finalized the time and was about to call Dr. Jarvis," Jonathan said. Lucian probed further after hearing that. "When is the date?" Jonathan cast a look at the calendar. 2 days later. Why?" Lucian nodded. "I got it." Then he hung up the call without offering Jonathan any explanation. After that, Lucian summoned Caden to his office. "Book me a flight to Summerbank tomorrow. I'm making a trip there personally." Caden gazed at his boss as he was confused. He merely consulted Lucian for his opinion on that matter earlier because Lucian had to make the decision. Caden was well aware that judging by the severity of the issue that arose at the Summerbank project, Lucian did not need to go there personally. Nonetheless, since Lucian had given the order, Caden did not dare to question him and swiftly agreed to proceed to make the subsequent arrangements. After hanging up the phone, Jonathan rang Roxanne right away. Roxanne picked up the phone very quickly and asked, "Mr. Queen, did the medicinal herb suppliers set up a time to meet already?" Jonathan smiled and answered, "Yes. They're hoping to meet up and discuss the details in 2 days' time." However, it depends on whether you'll be free by then. The biggest issue the Research Institute had was the supply of medicinal herbs. Naturally, Roxanne prioritized the meeting and agreed to meet them without any hesitation. I will be free. Please let them know I'll show up on time. You don't have to prepare anything. Once you've arrived, there'll be someone there to fetch you, Jonathan answered. In response, Roxanne said, "Thank you, Mr. Queen. Thank you for your help." Jonathan smiled and replied, "No worries. You've done a lot in curing my grandpa back then." After all, considering the relationship between Roxanne and Lucian, he felt as though it was his duty to help out. At the same time, Jonathan tried to help Lucian by mentioning him in the conversation. Besides, Lucian had already called me and asked me to hurry up. Hence, it's only right for me to put more effort into this. Hearing that, Roxanne fell silent, and she recalled what had happened the night before. According to Jonathan, Lucian still seems to be worried about matters concerning my research institute. Didn't I make myself clear last night? Besides, I've already told him Sonia is behind it. What is he up to now? After getting no response from her, Jonathan knew he had wasted his effort once again. He cleared his throat and said, "Since my job is done, I'll keep an ear out for your good news in 2 days' time." Roxanne pursed her lips and smiled. "If everything goes smoothly, I'll visit you and thank you again." They ended the call after exchanging some pleasantries. Jonathan was puzzled when he thought about how Roxanne had reacted when he mentioned Lucian. "I've already planned everything out thoroughly last night, no? I've given them the perfect opportunity to be alone with each other. Why is Roseanne's attitude toward Lucian still the same? What happened between the both of them after I left last night?" Now the only issue left with the Research Institute is the supply of medicinal ingredients. Roxanne heaved a sigh of relief after hearing those words from Jonathan. After ending the call, Jonathan texted Roxanne the details of medicinal herb suppliers in Summerbank. Roxanne got Colby to help her look through the details that day and came up with a business proposal. All that was left was meeting them in Summerbank. When Roxanne arrived home that evening, she looked rather relaxed compared to 2 days before. Archie and Benny grew anxious when they saw how relaxed Roxanne was. During dinner, Benny poked the food on his plate absent-mindedly and asked grumpily, "Mommy, are you almost done with the matters concerning the Research Institute?" Roxanne nodded. "I'm going to Summerbank in 2 days. If everything goes smoothly, the problem will be solved." In other words, they could be leaving the country soon. Archie and Benny's faces fell after they exchanged glances with each other. "Must we leave the country?" Roxanne acquiesced silently. She knew Archie and Benny were reluctant to leave Estella behind, and she was feeling the same way too. However, she started feeling uneasy again after she recalled how imposing Lucian was the night before. If we stay here, who knows what's going to happen in the future? 2 days later, Roxanne went to Summerbank early in the morning according to the agreed time. AI's Jonathan said, the moment she arrived, someone was already there waiting for her. Roxanne introduced herself before following the person out of the airport. After getting in the car, the driver asked respectfully, "Mr. Ziegler had already booked you a hotel room. Would you like me to send you to the hotel, or would you like to go to the office first?" Roxanne didn't bring anything with her, so she answered, "If Mr. Ziegler is free now, perhaps we should go to his office first." She just wanted to get it done with as soon as possible. The driver nodded in acknowledgement and immediately drove toward the other. When they were on the way there, he had also called Jasper Ziegler to keep him posted. When Roxanne arrived, Jasper was already waiting for her in his office. "Hey, Dred Jarvis. I've heard a lot about you." Jasper got up and reached out his hand for a handshake the moment he saw her. Roxanne shook his hand and greeted him politely in response. After exchanging some pleasantries, Roxanne decided to cut to the chase. Mr. Ziegler, the reason I'm here today is... Jasper interrupted her speech and said, I know. You're here to talk about the possibility of working together. There's no rush though. After all, I'm not the only party who is interested. Roxanne was stumped when she heard that. She thought Jasper had changed his mind, so she hesitated for a while before saying, I've already prepared the proposal. Would you like to look through it first? We can always make adjustments based on your requests. Jasper smiled and waved his hand dismissively. You've misunderstood what I meant. Since Mr. Queen introduced you to us, we won't go back on our words. What I mean is that our company is holding a banquet tonight and I was hoping that you could join us. Representatives from the other companies will be there as well. Roxanne heaved a sigh of relief. However, she was still hesitant. Oh, I see. I can wait. About the banquet. She had never worked with Jasper's company before, so she thought it would be awkward if she were to crash the party. Jasper didn't know what was on her mind, so he continued to persuade her by saying, according to Mr. Queen, you're well known across the globe, Dr. Jarvis. We would be honored to have you there. Besides, prominent figures from all over the country in the pharmaceutical industry will attend the banquet. Perhaps you could even build your contacts when you meet them. By attending the banquet, we'll both reap the benefits. Before Jonathan recommended Roxanne to him, Jasper had already asked about Roxanne's background. He knew how well she did during the medical conference back then. Coincidentally, a lot of prominent figures in the pharmaceutical industry were expected to attend the banquet. He thought most of them would know Roxanne. That was why Jasper wanted her there. If I can get her to attend, not only will I be able to show the guests how connected I am, but I can also show my appreciation toward Jonathan and Roxanne. Upon hearing that, Roxanne had no choice but to accept the invitation. Since you've already said so, I shall attend the banquet, Mr. Ziegler. I'll bring the documents with me when I go over in the evening. Jasper immediately rejected that suggestion of hers by saying, that's not necessary. We'll just have a discussion with everyone else tonight, okay? Let's not be so formal. Since you're not in a hurry, we can go over the agreement tomorrow. Roxanne hesitated briefly before agreeing to his suggestion. Jasper told Roxanne the time and place for the banquet before getting the driver to send her back to the hotel. Meanwhile, despite being in Horrington, Jonathan had also received an invitation from Jasper. Since Jonathan was busy with Queen Group, he couldn't attend the banquet. However, he thought of Lucian and guessed that Lucian would be interested in attending. After getting off the phone with Jasper, Jonathan called Lucian right away. The moment the call went through, Lucian asked, "Is Roxanne here already?" Hearing that, Jonathan froze momentarily. He then smiled playfully and answered, "She is." Besides, Dr. Jarvis' potential business partner in Summerbank had invited her to the banquet, and she had agreed to attend. Upon hearing that, Lucian furrowed his brows slightly and answered in a deep voice, "Got it." With that, he hung up the phone before Jonathan could say anything. A teasing smile appeared on Jonathan's face as his phone's screen dimmed. Although Lucian didn't say it out loud, he knew Lucian was surely going to be at the banquet. In Summerbank, someone knocked on Lucian's door after he hung up the phone. Farwell Group's business partner in Summerbank walked in with a smile on his face. "Mr. Farwell, would you like to go through our contract?" he asked. Lucian's business partners in Summerbank felt rather helpless because they were the ones who noticed the mistakes made by Farwell Group in the first place. Hence, they thought they could take advantage of it. However, they didn't expect Lucian to show up personally. Not only did they fail to take advantage of the mistakes made, but they ended up facing countless requests from Lucian. Ultimately, they almost lost the chance to work with Farwell Group. Throughout the past couple of days, Lucian had been cooperative, but he remained dubious about working with them. Hence, the person in charge took the initiative and humbly altered all the terms in the contract to Lucian's request. However, they still couldn't get Lucian to sign the contract. At the same time, they weren't willing to lose Farwell Group as a business partner. Even if they were to not make a profit out of the deal, they were certain that they could improve the company's reputation based solely on the fact that they had worked together with Farwell Group. Despite Lucian's attitude toward the deal, they were glad that he hadn't rejected them yet. In other words, there was still a chance for the deal to go through. With the slimmest of hope in their minds, the person in charge of the project had been consulting Lucian on a daily basis to gauge his opinions. That day, Lucian had one of his hands in his pocket and he was looking down at the person in charge. The person in charge hung his head low and he seemed to be cautious of his own actions. Although he still hadn't gotten an answer from Lucian, the person in charge didn't dare to rush him. From what I heard, your company is quite prominent in Summerbank, right? Lucian asked. The person in charge answered hurriedly, our company is ranked first in the industry we're involved in. With that, he looked at Lucian warily because he was worried that Lucian had found another business partner to work with. In response, Lucian nodded in satisfaction and said, I heard that Ziegler Group is organizing a banquet tonight. Is your company going to attend? Upon hearing that, the person in charge answered subconsciously, Our company isn't involved in the pharmaceutical industry, so Ziegler Group didn't invite us. As soon as he finished the sentence, he could feel Lucian looking at him doubtfully. The person in charge immediately regained his senses, and he altered, that being said, I'm sure Ziegler Group would invite us if we were to ask them about it. Lucian nodded. Get your boss to show up with the contract tonight. In other words, Lucian had agreed to sign the contract with them during the banquet. That left the person in charge all thrilled. He quickly agreed to the request and went back to inform the higher-ups about Lucian's demand. Roxanne thought she was just there to sign the contract and she didn't expect to be invited to a banquet. Since she was dealing with a potential business partner, she thought it would be disrespectful for her to show up wearing a suit. After giving it some thought, Roxanne gave Madeline a call. Madeline picked up the call fairly quickly and she asked, What's up, Roxanne? Aren't you in Summerbank for work? A day before she went to Summerbank, Roxanne had asked Madeline to help her take care of Archie and Benny. Madeline thought Roxanne was worried about Archie and Benny because of the sudden phone call, so she said, Don't worry, okay? I've already sent Archie and Benny to the kindergarten and I watched them go in. Roxanne chuckled and answered, With you in charge, I'm not worried. I just want to know if you know of any boutiques in Summerbank. I'm attending a banquet this evening. Hearing that, Madeline raised her brows in puzzlement. Aren't you there to sign a contract? How did you end up getting invited to a banquet? In a helpless tone, Roxanne answered, It's a request from the potential business partner and it wouldn't be nice of me to turn him down. Let me know if you know of any boutiques, okay? This is my first time visiting Summerbank and I don't know much about this place. Madeline didn't press her with further questions. She thought about it for a while and said, If I'm not mistaken, the Lane family has a branch there. Look around and see if you can find them. I think the boutique is called Neon Boutique as well. I'll give their person in charge a call. Having hustled throughout Chennai for the past 4 years, Madeline had made a lot of friends and she knew some of the younger members of the Lane family. Upon hearing that the boutique belonged to the Lane family, Roxanne appeared slightly hesitant. The Farwell family and the Lane family are close. Since I'm avoiding the Farwell family, I've also been avoiding all the prestigious families they're associated with. However, I had no choice but to work with Queen Group. Madeline wasn't aware of Roxanne's worries, so she said, I think they require customers to make reservations before going over. Wait a while, okay? I will make some calls and see if I can help you cut the queue. With that, she hung up the phone. Roxanne didn't reject the idea because she thought she wouldn't meet anyone from the Farwell family in a small boutique owned by the Lane family. Soon after that, Madeline called her and said, I've already made an appointment for you. Just mention my name when you arrive, okay? I need to attend to something, so I'm going to hang up now. As soon as Roxanne acknowledged it, Madeline had already hung up the phone. Seeing that it was getting late, Roxanne went to have a simple lunch before going to Neon Boutique in a taxi. When she arrived at Neon Boutique, it was already 1 in the afternoon. Roxanne mentioned Madeline's name, and true enough, someone came to bring her in right away. Roxanne picked an elegant look and took a seat while waiting for the stylist quietly. She wasn't sure if it was just her imagination, but she thought she had heard Lucian's voice while she waited. Roxanne only heard the voice for a split second, so she didn't think too much about it. In the meantime, the person in charge of Neon Boutique in Summerbank was following Lucian from behind when he said respectfully, Mr. Farwell, our head stylist is already waiting for you upstairs. Lucian nodded nonchalant. Thanks. His business partner did well. Although they didn't know why he wanted to join Ziegler Group's banquet, they contacted Ziegler Group as fast as they could and managed to get their hands on 2 invitations. Lucian wasn't prepared to attend a banquet, so he didn't bring the clothes he needed. Hence, he called someone from the Lane family before going to Neon Boutique. The hairstyle and makeup Roxanne picked was rather simple, so the stylist was done with her fairly quickly. She then picked a dress and went to get changed while the stylist waited for her outside the changing room. When he saw Roxanne coming out of the changing room, he was blown away. Miss, the dress fits you like it was made for you. He had been a stylist for years, and he had rarely seen someone picking such a simple look in Neon Boutique. Before he did her makeup, he noticed how pretty she looked. However, she had only picked a simple look, so the stylist didn't have a high expectation of how she would look when they were done. To his surprise, he was utterly blown away by Roxanne's beauty when he saw her. A bunch of Roxanne's hair was pinned into a simple bun behind her head with a simple pearl hairpin, and the rest of her hair was casually draped behind her head. With her light makeup, she was able to showcase her facial features. The makeup artist had even taken the initiative to put on some lip gloss on her lips. She was dressed in a white evening gown that exposed her shoulders. Her exposed skin was flawless, and her collarbone was alluring. In fact, she looked like an angel from heaven. If it weren't for the fact that people who would come to Neon Boutique for styling were rich and powerful, the stylist would have recommended her to join the entertainment industry and be a star. Upon receiving the stylist's praises, Roxanne simply smiled and answered, "Thank you." Roxanne then checked herself out in the mirror and nodded in satisfaction. "This is good. It's not too fancy, but it's enough to show my appreciation for the invitation." Roxanne turned to thank the stylist once again before heading downstairs to make payment. After exiting Neon Boutique, Roxanne realized it was about time to attend the banquet. Hence, she wanted to walk toward the side of the road to hail a taxi. Right then, she heard a voice coming from behind her. "Goodbye, Mr. Farwell," the Neon Boutique's person in charge said politely when he sent Lucian out. Lucian nodded slightly before turning around. That was when she saw a lady standing by the side of the road. He recognized Roxanne just by looking at her back. Roxanne heard the person in charge clearly. Right after that, Roxanne wanted to get out of there as soon as she could. Seeing that, Lucian's gaze darkened, and he quickly went up to her. "What a coincidence, Miss Jarvis." When she heard those words, Roxanne immediately halted in her tracks, and she was stumped. How could there be such a coincidence? Why is Lucian here? Also, why would he still call out to me after what I said? On the other hand, Lucian was also caught by surprise. Who would have known that when I was getting ready upstairs, she had been downstairs all along? I thought we'll only meet during the banquet. However, it's not such a bad thing to bump into her before the event. Lucian wasn't bothered by the fact that Roxanne didn't respond. He then approached her and stood beside her before asking in a deep voice, "You're all dressed up, Miss Jarvis. Are you attending the banquet? Were you planning on getting into a taxi dressed like that?" Roxanne frowned slightly and took 2 steps backward to create a distance from him. "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Farwell. You must be a busy man. I shouldn't take up your time." With that, she turned around to leave. Lucian looked stunned when he caught a glimpse of Roxanne. In the next second, he realized that she was trying to get away from him. Lucian's gaze darkened and he suddenly reached out his hand to grab Roxanne's wrist. Roxanne halted in her tracks and turned around to shoot him a wary look. Lucian then uttered authoritatively, "I'll send you." Roxanne pursed her lips in annoyance and tried to free herself from his grip. However, her effort was futile. Lucian noticed her intention and he said with a solemn expression, "Are you really going to hail a taxi, dressed like that? Can't you see what the weather is like? You don't have to worry about me, Mr. Farwell. I can take care of myself," Roxanne replied coldly. That was when Lucian realized he had made his concern for her too obvious. He then furrowed his brows and said, "I doubt you can get a taxi now. By the time you get a taxi, you'll be late for the banquet." Hearing that, Roxanne turned her head to check out the street. He's right. Neon Boutique is in such a secluded area and the road barely has cars passing by. Heck, I don't even see a taxi in this area unless I walk further down the road. Even so, I don't want Lucian to give me a ride. Roxanne then turned her head back toward Lucian. When she was about to say something, her phone suddenly rang. Roxanne frowned and raised her gaze toward Lucian. In response, Lucian slowly let go of her wrist. Roxanne whipped out her phone and saw that it was Jasper calling her. When she answered the phone, Jasper uttered in an uplifted tone, "Dr. Jarvis, where are you? The other business partners are already here. Even Mr. Lynch has arrived and he said he's eager to see you." Roxanne checked the time right after that. Although the banquet is not starting anytime soon, Mr. Ziegler said Mr. Lynch has already arrived. I can't let Mr. Lynch wait for me for too long. After some hesitation, Roxanne forced a smile and answered, "Please inform Mr. Lynch I'll arrive in a while." In response, Jasper acknowledged her request with a chuckle and hung up the phone. Roxanne stared at her phone as the screen dimmed and she felt troubled. This trip to Summerbank is full of surprises. Initially, I thought the most I need to do was just to attend the banquet. However, not only did I bump into Lucian, but it turns out Mr. Lynch is also invited to the banquet. I've already rejected Mr. Lynch as a mentor the last time around. If I were to let him wait for me, it would seem impolite. With that in mind, Roxanne steeled herself and said to Lucian, "If you don't mind, please give me a ride, Mr. Farwell." She was just avoiding me moments ago. Not a smile appeared on Lucian's face when he recalled how Roxanne had suddenly changed her altitude. "Well, since you've changed your mind, Ms. Jarvis, it's my honor to give you a ride." With that, he turned around and led her to his car. Upon getting into the car, Roxanne told the driver her destination. "Please take me to Blossom Hotel." The driver was arranged for Lucian by his potential business partner, so they didn't know each other personally. Hence, the driver thought Roxanne was Lucian's female partner for the evening when he saw the both of them getting into the car. "Wow. They look like a perfect match." The driver was briefly stunned by what Roxanne said. Without thinking too much about his reply, he instinctively answered, "That's exactly where we're going." For some reason, the temperature in the car plummeted after the driver finished his sentence. The driver subconsciously shuddered when he felt the change of mood in the car. After that, he just started driving. Meanwhile, the two people in the back seat had different expressions on their faces. Roxanne frowned and looked at Lucian suspiciously. How could there be such a coincidence? Didn't Mr. Ziegler say all the attendees are prominent figures in the pharmaceutical industry? Farwell Group isn't involved in the industry in any way, so why is he invited? Naturally, Lucian noticed she was looking at him unfazed. He turned toward her and said, "It seems like fate has brought us together." Hearing that, Roxanne's expression froze. She then pursed her lips and kept number throughout the entire journey. The car then slowly came to a halt at the entrance of Blossom Hotel. When they arrived, it seemed like the banquet had already started because there were a bunch of luxurious cars parked in front of the hotel. Seeing that, Roxanne grew anxious, and she wanted to rush into the hotel after getting out of the car. With a frown, Lucian asked coldly, "Is this how you show your gratitude, Ms. Jarvis?" Roxanne halted in her tracks and turned toward him with a puzzled look. After some hesitation, she said, "Thank you, Mr. Farwell." With that, she turned around to leave. In a sarcastic tone, Lucian asked again, "That's all, Ms. Jarvis?" Roxanne was feeling anxious and helpless at the same time. However, she maintained her composure and answered, "What would you like me to do, Mr. Farwell? I don't have the time to treat you to a cup of coffee now." The last time Lucian did her a favor, she showed her appreciation by treating him to a cup of coffee. Obviously, she didn't have the time for that. Lucian flashed an ambiguous smile and walked toward her. "What I want will not take up any of your time. It's just that I need a female partner for the banquet. If you don't mind, please accompany me, Ms. Jarvis." Hearing that, Roxanne pursed her lips and furrowed her brows without saying a word in response. If I accept his request, the others will surely misunderstand our relationship. However, I know Lucian well enough to know that if I don't do as he says, he's not going to let me off the hook so easily. Besides, even if I were to reject him, he's still going to make the others think we are involved with each other. I might as well just accept his request and lay out some ground rules. At that thought, Roxanne agreed to his request nonchalantly. When Lucian reached out his arm to lead her in, she ignored his gesture. In response, Lucian smiled and let her be. Hence, the two of them walked into the hotel side by side. The banquet was held on the second floor. When they entered the place, everyone's gazes fell on them at once. That evening, one of them was dressed in white while the other one was dressed in black. Although they didn't act intimately with each other, everyone seemed to feel as if they were a match made in heaven. Just like that, they walked toward the center of the event with everyone's gazes fixated on them. Roxanne endured the weird looks the attendees were giving her and swept a glance at everyone there. "Luckily, I don't see anyone from Horrington." She then heaved a sigh of relief inwardly. Still, she tried to distance herself from Lucian when they were walking together. Lucian knew what she was doing, so in response he purposely did the exact opposite. Roxanne couldn't help but stop walking before flashing a forced smile at him. "You have to socialize with the others, right, Mr. Farwell? I shall stay out of your way." With that, she slightly nodded at Lucian and walked in the opposite direction. Lucian's gaze darkened when he saw her making an escape. He didn't stop her because he didn't expect her to comply with his demand in the first place. He only asked Roxanne to be his female partner out of a whim, and he didn't know she would end up agreeing to it. Could it be because we're not in Harrington? With that in mind, Lucian flashed a self-deprecating smile. Meanwhile, Roxanne walked away and arrived at a corner. She then raised her gaze and tried to spot Gerald in the crowd. Right then, a familiar voice rang out. "Roxanne, are you and Mr. Farwell?" As one of the leading figures of the younger generation, Larry was also invited by Ziegler Group. Since he was free at that time, he decided to attend the banquet. However, he was rather surprised to see Roxanne there. He was even more surprised to see her attending the banquet with Lucian. Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.